In this video, we'll be adding 2 more obstacle types to our game, as well as telling the program to randomly select an obstacle type each time this obstacle is reset back to the right. So that way we add some variety to our game and make it a little bit more fun. So right now you should just have one single obstacle type, and again we're going to be adding 2. We'll add a tall one and a wide one, and then we'll get it to randomly kind of select which one is generated each time an obstacle moves, starting here at the right side. So that we see a different one basically each time. Alright, so let's close out of that. Let's go ahead and start programming in these obstacles. So up in our class section, we're going to add a class for each type. So we're going to start by adding the tall obstacle. So we'll say class. I'm going to call this tall obstacle. Alright, and then in the parentheses, we're actually going to put obstacle. So I'm just going to copy and paste that in there. And what that's going to do is basically allow this class to reuse all of the code that we already wrote in here rather than us having to copy and paste that code in here. What that is called, that's called inheritance, and what we basically just did is we made a child class called tall obstacle that basically just inherited all of the attributes and the methods from the parent class. Okay, so right now the tall obstacle is completely identical to its parent because we haven't told it anything that's going to be different. So the only thing that's going to be different with this one, because we've called it tall obstacle, is the height property. So I'm just going to copy and paste that in, and we're going to change that to 50. And that is the only change that we need to make in order to make this tall obstacle. Okay, so let's scroll down here a little bit to where our object was made, and we're going to change this to tall obstacle just to check that that worked. So if we run that, you'll notice that you now see a tall obstacle being generated, and rather than the small one. You'll notice it does not randomly select it. We don't see the small one anymore because we've overridden that with our new class. We'll get that here eventually. Okay, before we get the random part working, let's add in our other class, which will be the wide obstacle. And this one will be identical to what we just added, basically. So as you might expect, since this is called the wide obstacle, we're going to be changing the width to 50 here. And just like the last one, that's the only thing that we're going to need to change. And then before we move on, let's go ahead and just test that to make sure that that looks right. Yep, and it does. We can see that we have a wide obstacle being generated now. Okay, so what we're going to add now is the ability for it to randomly choose one of these 3 obstacles, either the base version, the tall version, or the wide version, each time that obstacle is generated. Okay, so what we're going to need to add is a function for this, and we have not added a function yet, so I'm going to copy one of these headers, and we're going to add that header in between our init and our class section. So I'm going to go above the classes, and then we'll just rename this functions. Okay. And this function is going to be responsible for changing the obstacle. So we're going to say def change obstacle. Okay. You'll notice this def keyword should be familiar because we actually made a function inside of our classes, except we called those methods. So anytime that there is a function inside a class, it's actually called a method. And when it's outside of a class, like what we're doing right now, we call it a function. Okay, so the first part of this function is going to hold all of our obstacles. We're going to make a list called obstacles, and it's just simply going to hold the names of each of our obstacle types. So we know that we have the base obstacle, which is just called obstacle. We have the tall obstacle, and we have the wide obstacle. Okay, and those are our 3 different types. Okay, the next part of this is we're going to create a variable, and I'm just going to call this variable obstacle. And it is going to randomly choose one of these 3 from the list. And in order to randomly select that, we actually need to import a class that will allow us, or import a library that will allow us to do that. So up here in our imports, let's go ahead and add a new one. This one is going to be called random. Okay. And then right here in our obstacle variable, we're going to say random.choice. And what this is going to do, we're going to tell it to randomly choose something from this obstacles list. So I'm just going to copy the obstacles list and put it inside there. So this obstacle will now contain one random item from this list. Okay, and the last thing that this function is going to do, we need to tell it basically to return this or to give this its choice back. So we'll say return obstacle. And then I'm going to put parentheses on the end so that it returns that obstacle that was chosen, so it doesn't just give the name back. We need to give the obstacle back. Okay, and then last change we're going to need to make, we scroll down here to where we have wide obstacle. We need to just call our function name there and make that change obstacle. Okay, if we run that, okay, you'll notice that that time it chose the small obstacle, and you notice that it keeps the obstacle the same. There is something that we'll have to add to get it to change each time, but I want you to notice right now, each time we click run, it's going to randomly choose which one right at the start. Okay, so if you run that a few times, again, you should notice that it's cycling. I haven't gotten the tall one yet, but if you run it enough times, you should eventually get the tall one. But the main problem right now is that we are not generating a random one each time it spawns. We're just randomly generating it each time the program is run. Okay, so in order to get it each time it spawns, we need to go into the obstacle update method so that when it basically gets to that left point and goes back, it not only goes back, but it goes in and reselects which obstacle is generated. So that code is inside here, and specifically right here with this if statement. So this is the part right here that we need to tell it to generate a new obstacle. Okay, and right at the start of this update, we're going to have to add a line of code that's basically going to tell it to use the obstacle variable that we defined. So we're going to say global obstacle. Okay. All right, so basically what that did is down here we have a variable called obstacle, which is currently holding whatever class obstacle is generated from this this function. All right, so we're basically, by saying global obstacle, we're telling it to use that global. Okay, and then right here, when we tell it to change the position, after that we're just going to say obstacle equals, and then we're going to use our function again, just like we did down here. Okay, if we save that, now I'm going to close out of this one. Now it should randomly select a different obstacle each time. Yep, and you'll notice that it is picking a random one each time, so it should switch between all three. I haven't seen a wide one yet. Oh, there it is. All right, that seemed like it worked. Thanks. See you next time.